Hello, this is your brain on drugs, and this is the punk rock psychiatrist. So that was Speedball by Strung Out, and the song's actually not like about a speedball that you put speed in, but it kind of sounds like it to me. So we're talking about methylphenidate, which is kind of related to amphetamines, which are kind of like speed. So um, they speed you up, they stimulate you. I thought the song Speedball would be a great song for today. And before I get started, I just want to let you guys know that I started posting some different kinds of videos to Instagram, and I started using TikTok. Before I was posting just like travel stuff to try and like show some lifestyle medicine stuff of how to get out there and like do good stuff and be healthy and exercise and things. But um, I got some advice to like just do some ones where I'm like actually talking. And so they're little short 1 to 2 minute clips where I give a little tip on psychiatry, kind of try and help um, let other people know that the podcast is out there. So if you are listening, those are out there if you want to listen to them. But also, like, it really helps if you follow the show or tell other people about it. I'm up to around 1,000 followers so far after a little over a year, which I think is really awesome. But I think there's a lot more people out there that would be interested in this material. So whatever you guys can do to help me get that word out, that would be really awesome for me. And like I said, I'm doing all this kind of pro bono, and I feel really good about helping other people and spreading information that is free and helps people to get better and is not influenced by industry. So without further ado, today we're going to have part 2 of methylphenidate. Remember last time we talked about methylphenidates, there are a truckload of them, and we talked about like 5 or 6 Ritalins, SL, SR, LA, Concerta, like all those. And today we're going to talk about Daytrana, Quillavant XR, Quillachew XR, Aptensio XR, Cotempla XR ODT, and Jornay PM. So we have a lot more methylphenidates on for today's show. And remember, this is all the same drug. It's just packaged in different ways that will have different benefits to people depending on how they use it. So let's go ahead and get started with Daytrana, and its generic name is methylphenidate transdermal. So this came out in 2006, and it is a patch. Remember, we have a patch which is more recently that came out with the amphetamine class. This is the patch for methylphenidate, Daytrana. It's dosed 10 to 30 milligrams in the morning, and you may be thinking to yourself, that's maybe not as high of a dose as I'm used to seeing with methylphenidate, which can go up to like 80 milligrams and sometimes up to 100. So 10 to 30, that doesn't sound like I'm going to be getting very much dose. What's going on here? So the bioavailability, there's a lot of stuff that actually controls like how much Daytrana or the methylphenidate in the Daytrana release package is got into your system. So bioavailability is actually higher for the patch than the oral formulation due to a lower first pass effect. And so those of you that are not in medicine may not understand what this is. So bioavailability is the amount of drug that you actually consume in whether, in here you're not consuming it like you're swallowing it, you're taking it as a patch. So it's the amount of drug that you actually take in that actually ends up getting into your system and doing stuff. And so a lot of pills that we swallow, they may be 90% bioavailable, they may be 50%. It varies, right? And what happens is just through the whole absorption and first pass process, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, a lot of that drug just gets not actually to the tissue that it's targeted for, and so it doesn't actually get used. And so you have to consider bioavailability when you're kind of saying, oh, that's a lot of drug, but hey, if it's only like 10% bioavailable, 90% of that's not getting into your tissue, so it's actually not a lot of drug. And in here, I'm not sure exactly what the percentage of bioavailability is, but it is much higher for the patch. And one reason for that is avoiding this first pass effect, right? So the first pass effect is where um, blood goes to your liver first, and then your liver changes it, and oftentimes it's the metabolite of the drug, which is what the liver changes it into, that is the active form. But a lot of the time, and sometimes the drug and the metabolite are active, and then sometimes it's just the drug is active and the metabolite is not active. So the liver's job is to detoxify things that are in your blood, and it changes things into something that your body can get rid of in your kidneys. Okay, that's basically one of the many jobs that the liver has. And that can work against us if it's taking a drug that we actually want to have in our system and changing it into something that we can't use. So when you absorb things through your skin or under your tongue, or you inhale it and things like that, not only does sometimes it will work faster, like especially if you inhale it or if you inject it, like we do IV drugs, but we also can skip a lot of that liver process, right? Because we have a hepatic circulation system that's connected to, but like somewhat separate from the rest of our circulation of our blood in our body. And so stuff that comes through our gut will often like go through our liver first before it can get to the rest of our body. But if we put a drug into our regular circulation, it's going to be in that circulation and kind of gone around the liver. It may find its way back there somehow, but you're going to jump over it for the most part. And so by this being a patch, you're avoiding some of that. So essentially, about 1.5 times of this drug, the drug is about 1.5 times more potent as an oral formulation. So the max of 30 milligrams is actually worth 45 milligrams. So that 30 is actually 45 and not 30. But 45 is still lower than like the 60, 80 or whatever that we're used to with methylphenidate. However, there are some other benefits that actually can make it actually more potent. One is a smoother curve. So the fact that it's absorbed slowly over time through your skin, that helps give it this like patch extended release formulation. Whereas with a pill, you're often getting all of that drug at once, and if you look at these curves, like it'll spike up and then drop down really quickly. And so the patch actually gives a much smoother curve, which is more pleasant for the patient to not get like way, a ton of drug at once and then it all comes out like really quickly. That's not terribly useful for us, especially when we want the drug to last all day long. All right. So the way we do the dose equivalent, so according to the package insert, the company, 13.3 milligrams is equivalent to 20 milligrams of methylphenidate. So that's the 1.5. So 1.5 times 13.3. I can't do that math in my head, but I think it's 20. All right. So another thing you need to be aware of is that whereas the oral products, we get the effect within 30 to 60 minutes, the patch takes quite a bit longer. So it can take upwards of 2 hours, which is like 2 to 4 times longer, to get into your system. And one thing you want to be aware of is to not put an external heat on that patch, because that will increase absorption. So like if you use like a hot pad or like direct sunlight or heating pad, these type of things, like hot water bottle, whatever, like if you get heat on the patch, it's going to absorb faster, and that's going to give you way too much drug way too quickly. All right. So it's designed to take about 2 hours to work. So you're going to want to put this on the child, because this is only approved for ages 6 to 12. You're going to want to put it on them, as early as possible. I mean, one of the advantages is they may still be in bed and not woke up yet, and you don't have to worry about getting them to swallow something. You could just, while they're still sleeping, just kind of go in there and slap the patch on their back and even let them sleep another half an hour, because it's going to take 2 hours before this medication actually like kicks in anyway. So, what another advantage of the patch is if you've got a kid that can't swallow or doesn't want to swallow or doesn't want to take anything by their mouth, but they're okay with the patch, then that's an advantage. The smoother curve is an advantage. The fact that you can put it on them earlier is actually could be an advantage. And then there's some other advantages, like you can actually take it off sooner. All right. So the if you use it, it says to have it on for 9 hours and take it off. That's the instructions, right? So remember, those first 2 hours, it's not actually going to work. But the duration is going to be around 8 to 12 hours because it lasts about 2 to 3 hours after you've removed it. Um, Now, you can take it off earlier and you can leave it on longer. The patch actually contains more medication. Like, it says it's 30 milligrams, but it actually contains more if you left it on longer. Like, I've never actually seen it, like any instructions where it says it's okay to leave it on longer, but I really don't have a problem with it. Like, if you look at kind of the way it works, you could use that to your advantage. All right. So that's another advantage. The fact that you can like kind of remove this earlier or later and kind of like, even though the instructions are leave it on 9 hours, because that's how it was tested. As a physician, I can say to the patient, hey, if it's lasting too long, let's take it off early. If it's not lasting long enough, maybe we leave it on a little bit longer. All right. Um, can you split this? No, but it comes in different sizes, and so you don't really need to, but you should not cut the patch. Like, that will interfere with the way it's absorbed. It may get absorbed more quickly, so do not cut the patch. And good news, it's generic. All right. And then I wanted to kind of go through, there's a chart that they had. It's interesting that they have this chart in their package insert, and it talks about like how much drug is actually in the patch, which is like way more than it says it is, right? So in the 10 milligram dose, you're getting 1.1 milligrams per hour of drug, and it contains 27.5 milligrams of methylphenidate. All of them come with 30 per carton, and each patch is actually like the 10, 15, 20, and the 30, they're bigger. Each one is a little bit larger than the one before, so they're different size. The 15 milligram patch will give you 1.6 milligrams per hour. It contains 41.3 milligrams total. The 20 milligram patch gives 2.2 milligrams per hour, which makes sense. That's twice as much as the 10 milligram, which was 1.1 milligram per hour. And it contains a total of 55 milligrams. And then the 30 milligram patch is 3.3 milligrams per hour, which, once again, that's equivalent, and contains 82.5 milligrams in the entire patch. I find it interesting that they have so much drug in these patches. So like a lot of the drug is like not getting absorbed. I don't know if this rate will hold up if you go beyond the 9 hours, but there is more drug in there. And so if it is wearing off too soon, you could consider using it longer. All right. Let's talk a little bit about how this patch is constructed. Um, it's there's 3 layers. One of them is just the liner that you peel off that prevents you from like touching the patch and like getting drug through your fingers. And then you've got like this drug adhesive mixed layer, so it's like the adhesive that sticks to the skin, but it's also got the drug in it. And then you've got the backing, which is the part that you would touch on the outside, so that you're not touching the drug after it's stuck to the skin. And you apply the patch to the hip area for 9 hours. The 2 hour delay, we talked about that. It's reportedly got milder side effects, so nausea, vomiting, insomnia, like less so. But you could get a rash, and they advise putting this, kind of under the underwear, like in the front, like on the side in the front under the underwear, like on your upper leg, kind of. But and you're not going to usually, with patches, you're not going to want to put them in the same location over like every day. So you're going to want to switch sides, switch locations, because patients can get a rash, and you're going to decrease that likelihood if you move around where you put it. All right. And then I've got this chart here that shows kind of the absorption differences between the 10, 20, and 30 milligram patch, and they're all kind of smooth, and each one, just peaks higher, right? Which would make sense. And they last about the same time each, but of course their doses will be higher at later periods of time than lower doses. So that's the patch. And so I have some good things to say about it. My bias because it's generic, maybe, but I think it's a good option. I think what is a downside of the patch? Perhaps patients are not able to get quite as much. We don't have the equivalent to like higher than that, like 45 milligrams, and so even though there is more drug in there, it could last longer, but it may not be as strong even if it lasts longer by leaving it on longer. So it may not be strong enough, but like it's only approved for 6 to 12 year olds, and that age group is typically not going to need a dose that's much higher anyway. The delayed onset of 2 hours can be a downside as well, because that is a bit long. A lot of parents complain it's hard to get the child going in the morning, and if you could like slap it on them while they're still sleeping, if you're up, you could get it rocking and rolling earlier. But if you don't have that ability, and it's just like too early, and maybe it's not working as early as we need it to for like class starting or anything, like that could be a disadvantage. Probably that would probably be like the biggest disadvantage, I would say. But as I said, all these different mechanisms, all these formulations of different drugs, they have their place, and you just kind of have to like personalize it to the patient that you're having. And if they're having these issues, then this is not the product for them. And if they're having issues with other products that you think this might solve, then maybe this is the product for them. All right, so let's talk about Quillavant XR. The generic name, now it's not generic, but the generic name is methylphenidate suspension reconstituted, ER. It's a long name. It came out in 2012. Even though it came out in 2012, it's still not going to be generic until 2031. So we still have what's almost 2026. So we've got about 5-6 years left, and it's dosed 20 to 60 milligrams, pretty standard. And what kind of sets this one apart is it's a long acting liquid. All right. So this is the first long acting liquid methylphenidate product that I believe we have talked about. We've talked about methylene oral solution, but that's not long acting. And let's see, which other ones have we talked about? Any other liquids? No, we have not discussed any other liquids. This uses the Liqua XR technology, which we have talked about before, but that technology was actually Dynavel. So Dynavel XR used the Liqua XR, so it's the same drug maker. So if you remember when we talked about Dynavel XR, Dianavel, I always say Dynavel, Dianavel XR, that is an amphetamine product. And so the company that makes Dianavel liquid also makes the Quillavant. And this actually came out before Dianavel, and it was the first use of the Liqua XR technology, but it's done a little bit differently with the way it's, you've got 20% uncoated microparticles and 80% film coated ER microparticles. And remember with Dianavel, it was like an infinite number of thicknesses that kind of was like super smooth. So with having 20% uncoated, that means you're going to get 20% up front. That's like kind of an IR product. And let's see, I want to go back and check out Dianavel. Let's see what. Yeah, it was, the way it said was an infinite thickness differences. it doesn't note if there's like more of the uncoated particles, like a 20% or not. It doesn't really reveal that. It just kind of says it has like an infinite number of thicknesses. We don't know if there's like a higher percentage of the less coated or not, but it's a pretty smooth product. But remember, it came out in what, 2015, so like 3 years later, and it's not going to be off generic until 2038. So Quillavant, we're getting a little bit closer with. Um, and the way it may not be quite as smooth because I don't know, this 20% uncoated and 80% film coated. I don't know if those 80% film coated are all equal thickness or if they're like different thicknesses. I was not able to find that. But like everything else is pretty similar to other methylphenidate products. Time to peak 2 to 7 hours, duration 9 to 12 hours. Can you split it? Yeah, because it's a liquid, 6 and up. So the main difference here with this one is that it's a liquid, and this was like one of the first liquid extended release products of any kind of drug that I'd ever heard of. And so it's got like, if you look at its curve, it's like really, um, it's really smooth. So it in the pharmacy, it comes as a powder that requires reconstitution prior to dispensing. And when you're using it, you need to shake it vigorously for 10 seconds before using it because this powder can kind of settle in the solution a little bit. And so the instruction is that you need to shake it to make sure it's even. And so when the patient drinks it, they're getting, an even amount of, they're not just getting like liquid without much of the drug in it. Okay. So that's one thing you need to be kind of aware of. But I mean, the great thing about this product is that it is liquid and it is extended release. And so that's a really cool thing. And a related product made by the same company. So this is like the third drug made by that company that makes Dianabol XR. They make Quillavant XR and they make Quillachew XR. So its generic name, even though it's not generic either, is methylphenidate chewable ER, although brand name Quillachew XR. Came out in 2015, right around the same time Dianabol XR did. And once again, everything's very similar, but it's a chewable, right? Dosing 20 to 60 milligrams in the morning, um, onset 20 to 60 minutes, time to peak 5 hours, duration 8 to 10 hours. Can you split it? Yeah, you could because it's chewable. Age 6 and up, generic 2030, and it uses the Liquid XR technology, and it has 30% uncoated particles and 70% film coated ER microparticles. So the only real difference between this one and Quillavant is that Quillavant is a liquid and this is a chewable. And this one will be under patent 2 years longer. And it's got the 30/70 mix versus a 20/80 mix. I don't know if that makes much of a difference. It may be kind of the same, and maybe the liquid versus the chewable, they needed to do the percentages a little bit different. It's got a really smooth curve, just like Quillavant XR does. Um, so, and yeah, it's actually scored. So not only can you split it, it's actually designed to be split. So there's a 20 you can split to make it 10. There's a 30 that you can split to make 15, and then there's a 40. And so I guess if you want 60, you're going to have to do a 20 and a 40. I don't know that they make a 60. So um, once again, do I understand why someone would prefer chewable over a liquid or whatever? I mean, I think chewables are probably a little bit better than liquids, honestly. I remember drinking cough syrup and stuff as a kid. Like, it's not like liquids are not very pleasant to take. And so I don't like, I personally would think people would prefer a chewable. They tend not to taste as bad and they tend to just be easier to take. But everyone's different. If you've got someone who needs liquid, then you've got the liquid XR product as well. And so the cool thing about this, and we had the chewable amphetamine product as well. So kind of go back and review that. It wasn't technically a chewable. It basically it's the ODT, oral disintegrating tablet. So the Adzenys XR ODT, it's kind of similar. It's made up of those like little microparticles, but it's designed to just dissolve in the mouth, whereas This is like designed to be chewed. So that is Quillachew XR. Next, let's talk about Aptensio XR. Now, its generic name is methylphenidate ER, and as you know, everything is methylphenidate ER, right? Ritalin LA is methylphenidate ER, Ritalin SR is methylphenidate ER. Like a lot of stuff is called methylphenidate ER. And so you have to know that Aptensio XR also has that name. And this one is generic, so its generic name would be methylphenidate. So they're going to have to put in parentheses like Aptensio, you know, equivalent product or whatever. This came out in 2015. A lot of this stuff is the same. Dosing 10 to 60 milligrams. Formulation, it's a capsule. Onset of action 20 to 60 minutes. Time to peak 2 and 8 hours because it's a long acting. So there's a peak at 2 hours for its initial and then 8 hours for its extended. Can you split it? Yes. Age 6 and up. Capsule 40% IR beads and 60% CR beads. So that would be like, continuous release, which would be like, it's a different kind of way. You got extended release, you got continuous release, you've got delayed release. So you might have DRs and CRs and XRs, ERs, and it is generic. So you may be wondering to yourself, what makes Aptensio XR any different than, say, like a Concerta or a Ritalin LA or something like that, right? Because it just seems like it's another XR product. Why was this produced? Well, its duration of action, they put is less than or equal to 16 hours. So when you compare that to these other ones, that's one of the longest, right? So let's go back and look at Ritalin LA, and it was 8 to 10 hours. And then we look at Concerta, and it's 10 to 12 hours. So this one, the thing is, it's the same amount of drug. So like you're stretching the same amount of drug over a longer period of time. And so you may have like, it may be less intense. That could be an issue. Or so you might actually need to take a higher dose of this because it is going to last longer. And so if you want to like, if you took like say 30 milligrams of Concerta and it lasts 12 hours, 30 milligrams over 12 hours versus 30 milligrams over 16 hours, that means you're going to have lower peaks. And so like you may need a higher dose. So the big sell on Aptensio, I've never used Aptensio. I've never seen it used. I assume it is used. When I listen to a lot of podcasts, and like in the private sector, people are using these like newer products. Like they love the new products because I think they're bought and sold by the pharmaceutical industry, whether they realize it or not. There are studies out there. No doctor thinks that they're affected by marketing, but the studies show you are, and you are quite a bit. And all like, because you really, doctors have a little bit of a narcissism complex that like they think that they're smarter, just they think they're smarter than everyone else just because they're doctors, and like they had to be like smart to get into medical school and finish it and everything. That doesn't mean they're savvy. That doesn't mean that they're con artisty, right? That doesn't mean that they're like manipulative style. There are lots of different types of intelligence, and there's the kind of intelligence that like is like book smart, and then there's street smart, right? And that's a real deal. These drug companies and these sales reps are street smart, and they can convince smart people to do dumb things, right? So they are manipulated by this marketing, and then they will parrot exactly what these people tell them. And it's like, and they think, oh, I'm so smart because I'm a doctor. That doesn't mean you're not vulnerable to being fooled. All right. So um, the one benefit I'd say for Aptensio is if you need something that lasts longer and you just want one pill instead of like having to do like, a short and a long to, a long and then adding a short later, this might be a good option. So I that's something that you might want to consider. And especially for like older, like adults and things, even I use Concerta for the most part, or, its generic equivalent. And, um, it doesn't always last as long as maybe we'd want. And so this is one that might last a little bit longer. All right. So that, and it's got, relatively smooth curve, but it does have a peak at 2 hours and the peak at 8 hours, like I had said before. All right. Interestingly, in their chart, they, and this comes from their drug information sheet. They basically show the difference of 80 milligrams whenever they say that 60 is the max. So it's kind of interesting that they like show the peak plasma concentration over time with an 80 milligram dose when that's not even a pill size that they like recommend people take. But it is what it is. Next, we're going to talk about Cotempla XR ODT. So this is known as, in its generic name, methylphenidate ER disintegrating, because ODT means oral disintegrating tablet. This came out in 2017, but it's actually going to be generic like sometime next year in 2026. All right. So you may be wondering to yourself, is this just exactly the same stuff, but it's an oral disintegrating tablet? And the answer would be yes. Um, so yeah, it like we had the long acting liquid, we had the long acting chewable, now we have the long acting oral disintegrating tablet. And honestly, that's about all we've got. It's dosed a little funky, 17.3 milligrams to 51.8 milligrams, with 17.26 milligrams being equivalent to 20 milligrams. So that 51.8 equivalent to 60. So you kind of have to take that into consideration. It's a oral disintegrating tablet XR, 20 to 60 minute onset of action, time to peak 5 hours, duration 8 to 12 hours. Can you split it? Yes. Age 6 and up. It contains 30% immediate release microparticles and 70% ER microparticles. And I don't know, when I look at the curve, they've stretched it out a little far, but to me it looks a little bit smoother between the early peak and the late peak. And here's the other issue. If you want to give the higher doses, like 34.6, you have to take two 17.3s. And if you want the 51.8, you have to take a 25.9 and two 25.9s. And so, like, often what will happen with that is that you're then paying quite a bit more because you're paying for like two 17.3s. And so, like, when I look up the drug prices, and I said I was going to do like a drug price episode at some point. Also, they actually make an 8.6. So even though the starting dose is 17.3, you can dose it lower, which is a pretty small dose. But when I look at this, and remember, this is not generic yet. This is a branded product. So like the sticker shock is going to be huge. The 8.6, the 17.3, and the 25.9, which remember are equivalent to 10, 20, and 30 milligrams, is $21.52. They all cost exactly the same. But to take that 34.6 and 51.8 milligram dose, where you're having to take double, that is gonna end up being $43 a day, because you're taking two $21.52 products per day. They don't have like a 34.6 milligram pill that also costs $21. So they're actually at those higher, sometimes at the higher doses, you're paying a little bit more, and sometimes you're paying like double, because that's just how they scam you, right? I mean, like, I'm looking here at Concerta. It looks like this is like a generic of Concerta, and when you look at the lower doses, they're around $14, 40. Then they go up to like $23, $24. So the higher doses are actually they're not double, necessarily. They're close. It's close to double, but a little bit less. Um, and then here, what we've got, the Relexi, the lower doses are 14, 14, 15. Then it goes up to 25. Then oddly, 54 milligram dose is $16, because the 45 is kind of, remember, that was like the dose that they included the Concerta didn't have. So like they're like charging a premium for that like dose you can't get with Concerta. And then 63 is another dose you can't get with Concerta. They make it $27. And then the 72 milligram is also $27. So the 72 of Concerta is actually cheaper, but some of the lower doses are actually like about the same price. And so it's just really confusing. And I don't feel like anyone's really looking out for the consumer, or for, I mean, we demonize the insurance company, but like the insurance company is buying our healthcare, right? Like, so when we say that like healthcare costs us on average $12,000 per year, that means that somebody has to pay that $12,000 per person per year. I mean, That's a lot in the US, right? You've got a family of four, that's $48,000 of healthcare that has to be covered somewhere. And if you're not paying premiums of $48,000 a year, that means taxes are covering this. It could mean, I mean, it's high. Maybe people that are paying more, or that have more money might be paying for it. They're paying higher taxes. The government could be paying part of that. It's a lot of money. Okay. And so, like, the insurance companies, while they're taking their cut as well, they're having to pay for this health care. And so they're paying hospitals, they're paying the pharmaceutical companies for these products. Now, they can often negotiate the prices down more than if you were buying it directly. They pay, two, three, four times less. Um, but it also depends. They might be able to pay less for one hospital or drug, and another one they're not paying less for. And so, as the physician, you don't know what to do. It's just such the US has such a complicated healthcare system. That's just such a disaster. Um, but I think having some awareness of this at least is helpful. And so, yeah, just be aware that often these higher doses cost double. Not that you wouldn't do it, but that is the case. All right, so let's talk about our last methylphenidate product today that I'm going to talk about. That would be Jornay PM. So this is methylphenidate ER as well. It came out in 2018. And whereas, a lot of these products were kind of similar, this one's got a pretty cool difference. All right, so I think if anyone who knows what Jornay PM is and why it would be called PM, because you take it in the PM. So the dose is 20 to 100 milligrams taken at night between 6:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. Also, you might be thinking that's kind of a high max dose. Well, its dose equivalents are 33.3 milligrams is actually equivalent to 20 milligrams. So that 100 milligram dose is closer to like a 60. All right. It is a capsule. Its onset of action, this is the big difference, 10 to 12 hours. So it takes 10 to 12 hours. And this is one of the only medications that I'm aware that works like this, where it actually does not kick in for 10 to 12 hours. And its time to peak is 14 hours. So, of course, that would be 2 to 4 hours after its onset happened, right? Because it took 10 to 12 hours to work, 14 hours for it to peak. Its duration is 8 to 12 hours. You can split it. It's used for ages 6 and up. Um, and you may be wondering to yourself, like, you either know what this does or you've already figured it out. Like, what is the purpose of this product, right? This is for when you've got those kids that you really need the medication to work as soon as they wake up, right? Like, you can't even get them ready for school. Like, you can't, like, even, like, you're late to school every day because the kid is so out of control with their ADHD, right? And you give them the pill as soon as they wake up, but it takes that 20 to 60 minutes to work. And, like, are you able to give it to them as soon as they wake up? How long does it take them to wake up? Like, how long does it take to get them to take the pill? You're getting it to them as early as possible. And then often you're not getting the benefit of that pill in the house before you leave. And then, like, you're running late. Other kids are late when they're getting to school. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a drug that kicked in as soon as the kid woke up? Well, now we have Jornay PM. I personally have never seen it, but I don't treat children. This is not something I would give to adults. Adults are not going to need that immediate kind of thing. Usually for adults, which is who I've treated for ADHD, they're less concerned about how soon it works in the morning, and they're more concerned about it not wearing off too early. Like, it just doesn't last long enough. So I'm often advising them, well, how long can you get away without having the drug in your system in the morning that you could take it a little bit later? Maybe you take it before you go to work, maybe you take it after you get to work. And then, when do you really need that prime time? Because and other people might be like, well, just give them more, just give them like a longer acting, just give them like an extra dose in the afternoon. And we're trying to minimize the amount of drug in the person's system, if we can. It's going to help them with tolerance. It's going to help, like, if, a lot of people say, like, a lot of these ADHD advocates, they're just like, give them as much as they need, and that's the amount they need. Most patients don't want to take that much. They want to minimize it. And so, like, I'm often having the onset of action last a little bit longer. But when you're dealing with children and you're dealing with trying to get them ready and get them to school and like them starting their day of school, you want it to be working in the morning. You want it to be working all day while they're at school. And you want it to be working a little bit after they get home as well, to be honest, so that they can get their homework done, right? And you want it to wear off before dinner. So ideally, you've got it working from like as soon as they wake up in the morning until dinner time, because we want them to be able to eat, because they're probably not going to eat lunch at all, maybe a little bit. And we don't want them to not gain weight, especially kids, right? We need them to gain weight and grow. And so we want to get a good breakfast in them, and we're going to talk about this later when we talk about adverse effects, but we want to get a good breakfast and a good dinner in them. But Jornay PM comes in when we really need that working as soon as possible. So the way this pill is constructed, it has two layers. The first layer is a delayed release. It's basically just like not drug. It just like it eats through it. It takes 10 to 12 hours to get through it. And then the second is an extended release product. And so when you look at its chart, it comes in 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 milligrams. And remember, it's 33 to 0.3 equivalent to 20. So those higher doses are actually equivalent to less of what you're thinking of methylphenidate. And when they kind of show the chart next to methylphenidate IR, they show that it doesn't kick in until later. And actually on their chart, it actually looks like it starts working, like it's not working at after 6 hours, and then it starts to pick up at 6. And then you've got a tiny bit of drug in your system at like 8 hours, but maybe it's not enough to be noticeable. And then by 10 to 12, it's like, okay, this drug actually feels like it's working. And then, I don't know, on their chart, it looks like, I said it peaked around 14 hours. And honestly, that's about what it looks like. It looks like its peak is around 14 hours. So I think this is a pretty cool product. It's not generic. It's going to be generic in 2032. And so it's a little bit shorter episode, but I wanted to split methylphenidate into 3. I don't want to take more time and go through all the rest of the products, but let's just review since we have a little time, let's review all the methylphenidate products that we've talked about up to this point. So we've got the immediate release Ritalin. We've got the solution immediate release, so the liquid immediate release. We've got a chewable immediate release. We've got an extended release product, which is Ritalin LA, which is like a 8 to 10 hour kind of 2 peak drug release product. And then we've got another extended release, Concerta, which is a little bit longer acting, 10 to 12 hour extended release that's got like a triple acting. And then we've got the branded generic Relexi, which is similar to Concerta, but comes in some different doses. Then we've got what we talked about today. We've got the patch, which is a long-acting product that is in patch form, Daytrana. And then we've got an extended release liquid, Quillavant XR. And then we've got an extended release chewable, Quillachew XR. And then we've got Aptensio XR, which is a little bit longer acting product, which goes up to 16 hours. And then we've got Cotempla XR ODT, which is an extended release oral disintegrating tablet. So we've got a lot of extended release products that are around 8 to 12 hours. We've got Concerta, which is a pill. We've got LA, which is a pill, which is a little bit shorter. We've got Quillachew, which is a chewable. We've got Quillavant, which is a liquid. We've got Cotempla, which is an oral disintegrating tablet. And we've got Daytrana, which is a patch. And these are all pretty similar in a lot of respects. It's like what drug they are and how long they act. But they're just different like ways of taking the drug, right? And then we've got Jornay PM, which is a pill capsule, but it's got that super long delayed release where it works in the morning. So that one is very unique. Nothing is like Jornay PM, and nothing really works as long as Aptensio XR. And so like all the other ones, or all the other extended release products, are kind of similar. They're just like you're taking it differently, and then Aptensio just lasts longer, and Jornay takes longer before it kicks in because you take it at night. All right, and so that's going to wrap up the methylphenidate products that I talk about today. I've left a few more. Just a preview, we're going to talk about Aptensio XR. We're going to talk about Focalin XR. We're going to talk about Adsaris, which is a lot different product. And then I'm actually going to talk about Provigil and Nuvigil, the modafinils products, next time as well, which are also stimulants, but they're not FDA approved for ADHD, but sometimes we use them for that. So I'm going to talk about those next time as well. And so I hope you learned something about, you're wondering like, oh, I'm so confused. There's so many methylphenidates out there. What is the actual difference between all of these? All right. So hopefully you got those questions answered, and you're looking forward to finding out about the rest of the methylphenidates. All right. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.